Hi, everyone, and a warm welcome to this joint meetup seminar with Women in Tech and Schibsted, which is one of the biggest Nordic media groups. I'm Paulina Modlitba. I've been the program editor, director for the main conference, the Women in Tech conference that takes place in March every year. And I've done that for about 5 or 6 years. Women in Tech, for those of you who don't know what that is a nationwide platform that encourages women and girls to pursue a career within technology. But we're also a platform that encourages, supports, and creates networking opportunities for women who are already in the tech industry, and that's equally important. And we do that with a number of partners. The great thing with Women in Tech is that we've had the big tech and media companies behind us from day one. So we've partnered with MTGX, Google, Spotify, Accenture, Schibsted, Bonnier, to name a few throughout the years. And they're so important for us. And apart from the annual conference, what we do is we host these type of meetups as a way for our partners to meet our network, to meet you, and also a way of doing a more valuable type of employer branding and branding in general together with us. So it's a win-win situation, really. And most of these companies, I should mention, aren't experts. They haven't sort of reached the end of the road when it comes to hiring women within tech. They're all very humble, and we're humble that this is a challenge that we have to sort of pursue and we have to keep working on, and we do it together. And it's so nice to see that companies that are normally competitors actually come together, because this issue and this goal is so important, and we have to join forces. Women in Tech as an organization highlights the big questions that are important. So in addition to diversity, inclusion, we also focus on questions like sustainability. AI and responsibility is, of course, and ethics is, of course, one of those topics. I would say, from a personal perspective, that it's probably one of the most important, urgent topics right now in modern society. And therefore, I'm so glad that the topic today of this meetup is responsible AI. And with me here today to give a talk is Agnes Stenbom, who's the responsibility data and AI specialist here at Schibsted. And she's here to give you some concrete examples of how responsible AI can be applied, or how AI can be applied responsibly, so that those of you who are maybe new to AI or just about to sort of pursue the field of AI will get a very sort of clear first image of the ways in which AI can be used. So, welcome, Agnes.
Thank you very much, Paulina. I'm actually very happy to be here. I'm happy that you joined me here as well. This is my first day in the office since March. We're currently in the studio of the basement of Schibsted's Stockholm office. Very exciting to meet in person. So, my name is Agnes Stenbom, and I am the Responsible Data and AI Specialist at Schibsted. It is a fluffy title, I'm well aware of that. What it means in practice is that I work with tons of different strategic initiatives related to how and why we use AI across our brands and products. I'm also doing a PhD at KTH here in Stockholm, where I focus specifically on how AI might be employed in responsible ways in newsrooms. Here, the goal is to help identify sustainable strategies for our industry going forward. Today, we're going to be looking into how Schibsted is using AI for newswork. To give you some context as to why we are doing that, I'd like to give you a crash course on what Schibsted is. A Schibsted 101. Who are we? What do we do? Then, we'll look into how we're using AI for newswork specifically. I'll share some concrete use cases and also highlight some of the dilemmas that come with them. Finally, we'll end with a Q&A where I hope that you guys will provide Paulina and myself with some interesting, probably some difficult questions. To submit your questions, you can go to slido.com, and this link is open throughout my talk. Go there and enter the code 26649 and submit your comments or questions or remarks. So, what is Schibsted? Many of you probably know us as a media company, a publisher. And while publishing is indeed where our roots are found, we're much more than that today. What started as a publishing house back in 1839 in Oslo, established by Christian Schibsted, has now evolved into an international group of digital consumer brands. Today, we run services in 3 different business areas. We have marketplaces, companies like Blocket. We have news media operations, where we run sites like Aftonbladet, Svenska Dagbladet, Omni, primary news destinations in our markets. Finally, we have a diverse portfolio of services that we call Next. In Next, you'll find financial services, distribution operations, price comparison sites, and tons of different venture investment companies, startups. Last but not least, Schibsted is also the major owner of the global marketplaces company Adevinta. Described in short, Adevinta is the result of a successful rollout of our marketplace concept across the world. This endeavor turned into quite the hefty business, and last year we spun it off into its own entity on the Oslo Stock Exchange. It was the biggest company to be listed there in 19 years. This summer, Adevinta took one further step by acquiring eBay Classifieds. This made Adevinta the biggest marketplaces company in the world. Each of our business areas have an important role to play in society. Our marketplaces are important enablers of the circular economy. Our news media brands are building blocks in the Swedish and Norwegian democracies, voicing opinions, sharing information. Our Next operations are empowering consumers through increased transparency, where people can take loans at the best possible interest rate or buy goods at the best possible price. I'm excited about all of our areas of operations, but today we'll be focusing on our news media sites. To me, Schibsted is quite a clear example of an organization daring to disrupt itself through technological and societal changes. However cheesy it may sound, change and evolution is part of who we are as a company. We've managed to shift from print to digital. And now it's time for a new wave of changes and challenges. We're entering the age of AI. But what does that mean beyond all the hype and the funky laptop stickers? And how do we make sure that as organizations, we're ready to use these tools in safe, responsible ways? That's what we're talking about today. So, speaking about hype, let's get rid of some buzzwords from the start. To understand what kind of AI it is that Schibsted is working with, it might be wise to delimit what we're not working with. Here, understanding the difference between artificial intelligence, AI, and artificial general intelligence, AGI, becomes important. AGI refers to a primarily theoretical idea of computer systems earning a general level of intelligence that makes them, just like human beings, able to act as independent agents in society. You've probably seen some kind of Hollywood version of this. Movies like The Terminator, Ex Machina. This is not the type of technology that we're working with at Schibsted. What we are exploring, though, is good old-fashioned AI. There are tons of different ways to define AI, and at Schibsted, we use the term as an umbrella concept. We think it's a term that covers a wide variety of technologies. A major part of this umbrella term is ML, machine learning. So ML is definitely the part of AI that we're working the most with at Schibsted, and it tends to be the same for most other organizations talking about AI. Machine learning can improve, simplify, or completely transform business-critical tasks for a digital group like Schibsted. And in recent years, we've started exploring its potential in lots of different ways. Today, I'll be talking about both AI and machine learning, mixing the terms when talking about the broader concept and machine learning technology specifically. So today we're talking about news. But what is news then, really? We have tons of definitions to get through here. There are many different ways to describe the intricate processes and skills needed for journalists and editors to carry out high-quality news work. There are models outlining the small and big decisions that we all have to take in order to create these publishing products. I recommend anyone interested in that to go look at those in detail. Today, though, we're going for a less is more kind of model. Modern news work could, roughly speaking, be categorized into 3 different themes of tasks: creating content, making sure that that content gets in the hands of those who want or need it, and analyzing the process and the output to make sure that the next story, the next process, gets even better. With AI, the boundaries between these buckets are blurring. We're entering a reality where real-time analysis and seamless digital distributions are the new norm. And at Schibsted, we're becoming increasingly data and AI-driven throughout our news process. We're primarily exploring AI technologies for distribution and analysis tasks, and you'll understand why in a second. So let's look at some concrete use cases. While we are indeed becoming a digital-first society, we're far from digital only today. We still print and distribute thousands of papers every day. And most of these are, of course, read back to back, but some of them end up not reaching anyone. Every day, newspapers are sent from our distribution centers to various local retailers like 7-Eleven or Pressbyrån. If there are unsold papers in these stores by the end of the day, the vendors resend these papers to our distribution centers and get a refund for the returned copies. So a key challenge here is to make sure that the right amount of papers are sent to each specific store each day in order to minimize waste and unnecessary transportation. Through an ML solution, we have been able to predict not only how many papers to distribute to each specific store, given on a prediction on how many papers we think that store will sell on a specific day, but also how many papers we actually print, minimizing both the paper waste and the distribution emissions. Distribution is, of course, also digital. As you might have experienced yourself, there's an ongoing shift towards subscriptions and digital news media. Subscriptions are hugely important in order to safeguard the financial longevity of news media. Ensuring that the right content gets put behind the so-called paywall is very important here. To do so, we've built our own newsroom tool that we call Oraklet, or the Oracle. Through anomaly detection, which is a machine learning technique, Oraklet analyzes articles that we've published and indicates when a certain level of readership interest is reached. Then it indicates through a Slack notification to editors and journalists when it might be suitable to put content behind a paywall and start marketing a subscription. Note here that the final decision on whether or not to actually put the article behind paywall is made by a human journalist, human editor. Even if there's a shift towards subscriptions in news media, a big portion of the industry's revenue is still based on advertising. So how should we determine what ads to run with each article on our site? We could go for demographic segmentation. If we know, let's say, that you're a 20-something woman living in Stockholm, we might consider that you like fashion. You may be thinking of redecorating your home office in COVID times, or maybe you're thinking about starting a family. This type of advertising can be highly effective, and it's something that we've worked with a lot in recent years. But with upcoming changes in both regulation and user behaviors, we've started experimenting with a shift in logic. So instead of using you, the reader, as the basis for what's advertised, we're using the context in which the ad is displayed. Our demographic groups might not always be the best indicators of what we like, what types of ads would appeal to us. We believe that our actual behaviors are better signals. If I'm reading an article about US politics, that probably means that I'm interested in US politics. This type of contextual advertising allows for advertisers to choose not the people they want to reach, but the context with which they want to be associated. I personally find this a very exciting way to try to look beyond the stereotypical and often biased ideas we have around what groups in society are going to enjoy what types of things. To be able to pick up on the topic of articles, the context of articles, beyond just keywords in the future, we're currently teaching a machine learning model called Electra to understand, not speak, understand Swedish. To do so, we're leveraging our unique access to high-quality text data, namely our article datasets. So we have about 3 million articles published on Aftonbladet, Svenska Dagbladet, and Omni. In addition, we added a few other documents to the model. We could not train it on just any old random text out there, but it needed to be high quality and lots of it. We chose to include about 3.6 million Wikipedia documents, the Oscar corpus, Swedish parliament speeches, the journal Forskning och framsteg, open subtitles, so movie subtitles, and TED Talk transcripts in Swedish. Together, these documents form a dataset of about 80 million documents. We chose these sources as they represent modern language, high-quality language. They're not academic texts, neither are they Facebook troll posts. They are documents teaching our model to understand high-quality, modern Swedish. Speaking of high-quality texts, we want our content to reach relevant audiences. And for that, tagging is crucial. All of our journalists are asked to add tags to their articles that they're writing. These are important to be able to make sure that articles around the same topic can be linked together, but also to, for example, simplify search functions. We've created a machine learning model that helps suggest these tags to journalists who historically have been creating these manually. Instead of having to come up with what the tag should be, we simply automatically generate a suggestion from which human journalists can pick and choose. This makes the process smoother for them, but also more coherent across our brands, making linking across articles and sites more accessible. Okay, so now you have a basic idea around what these new AI tools might do in a news media setting. But what about the actual content creation? You've all used translation services. You've had a message on your iPhone be autocorrected. You've seen machines generate text. So how come we're not automatically having machines generate all the content at Schibsted? Let's look at an example where we tried. Most of you are probably familiar with SEO, search engine optimization. For our content to rank high on search indexes, search engines like Google, our journalists across our brands, but today we're looking at Aftonbladet, they're asked to write SEO headlines for each new article that they produce. This SEO headline follows the rules of the SEO game. They are more informative. They often include the subject, the sender. If there's a famous person being written about, they are usually included. All of this is done in order for articles to be picked up by the Google search algorithm, ranked high on the Google search index, and then drive traffic from Google into Aftonbladet. In this specific case, that meant that an article journalistically titled "Sanna kände inte igen mig" got an SEO headline that was "Intervju Mikael Persbrandt om Tårtgeneralen." Much more informative, much more search-friendly. We, the central machine learning team at Schibsted, which I was then part of, and the SEO team at Aftonbladet, we started thinking whether we could maybe apply machine learning to this task. What if human journalists did not have to write these SEO headlines at all? Did not have to learn about the ever-changing rules of SEO neither? What if we could have machines do the work for them? We had two key goals in doing so. On the one side, we wanted to create value off of already performed labor. We wanted to create SEO headlines for all of the hundreds of thousands of articles on Aftonbladet.com that today do not have an SEO headline, meaning that we could drive traffic to our site from work that we already performed. On the other hand, we wanted to help journalists going forward, helping them create SEO headlines for future articles. Here, we saw great potential in pairing human and machine expertise, having human journalists write the creative journalistic headline and machines generate headlines that would be picked up by an algorithm and ranked high on a search index. An important note here is that our ambition was never to automatically generate and publish the SEO headlines, but to generate a suggestion that a human journalist or editor could review and either accept or reject. For our model training in this case, we used, again, the full article dataset of Schibsted in Swedish. So articles produced by Aftonbladet, Svenska Dagbladet, and Omni. We also split it into a subset with only Aftonbladet articles that also had an SEO headline. Our modeling was a stepwise process where we first taught the model to generate a normal headline, a journalistic headline based off on the normal data set that we had. We then transferred that knowledge and added the SEO-specific data set to teach the model to generate SEO headlines. It looks very easy on this slide, but as I said in the beginning of my presentation, we're going for less is more models today. So our approach was to generate suggestions for journalists to review. To get a proof of concept, we used something as straightforward as a collaborative sheet, where we put the headlines that our model had generated into this sheet where an editorial worker could review it and either accept or reject it, say that it was good enough or not good enough to be published. For the most part, the results of this experiment were exactly what we planned for and hoped for. Journalistic headlines such as this, a quote about mental illness, were given an SEO headline that better followed the rules of the SEO game. In this case, that meant adding a sender to the message, adding Socialstyrelsen. But as we, through our training data, had taught and instructed our model to generate Swedish headlines according to the SEO logic, our model was so eager to generate SEO-savvy headlines that it sometimes went away from the original meaning of the article. In one specific case, that meant that an article where the Swedish school authorities were saying that climate strikes for the future, they're something that you should do on your free time, our model swapped the sender into someone that was more SEO-friendly, more searchable, a more popular term. According to our model's generated headline then, Greta Thunberg was the one saying that school strikes for the climate are for your free time. Unlike most corporate presentations, this isn't a case highlighting a great win. We reached really far with this model, and we broke some new grounds in Swedish and Scandinavian natural language processing, natural language generation. But we didn't reach far enough, and our model was not considered appropriately or high quality enough to be brought to production just yet. The editorial team who had reviewed our headlines deemed that the quality was too low. We didn't reach the jointly very ambitious goal of 80% accuracy. As our project was aimed at assisting, helping journalists, creating headlines that were almost right didn't seem very helpful. I wanted to highlight this case because I think it illustrates what kind of dilemmas an organization like ours might face when working with AI in news practically. In this specific case, the downsides clearly outweighed the upsides from a Schibsted perspective. Ensuring that safe and true information is spread in society, that's something that we don't negotiate. The dilemma then became manageable in practice, and we decided not to pursue the model until we've made significant progress in NLG and NLP. Maybe our work with the Electra model that's happened after this experiment is going to help us. Time will tell. I also think that this SEO case is quite a straightforward example of just how complex language generating content actually is. Translating a word from one language to another is one type of task, one that translation services are managing really well. Making machines understand the semantic context of language and generate new language based off of that, that's a completely different challenge that we're yet to master. The dilemmas of AI are not always as straightforward as in this SEO case. And the signals indicating that it might be a good idea to go back to the drawing pad, they're not always as loud. The examples of ethical misconduct and irresponsible AI, they're starting to add up. These scandals are not coming from an ambition to misbehave or do bad. In many cases, I think it comes from a poor risk assessment. Companies not thinking broadly enough about what the societal impact of their technologies might be. At Schibsted, we've recently collaborated across disciplines to investigate some key areas of potential future concern regarding our own AI developments. Together with the Cambridge philosophy major, we've distilled 5 key concerns where theoreticians, so academics, policymakers, where they seem to consider there to be pressing risks to consider. In brief, these areas can be explained as traceability and interpretability. So our inability to understand how or why an AI system comes to a given conclusion or decision. This issue refers a lot to what you've probably heard about regarding the black box of AI. Unreliability is a related issue. How could we ever trust what comes out of an AI system if we don't understand the process of getting there? How could we ever rely on AI, really? Thirdly, curation relates to the curation, filtration, personalization of news media content specifically. Here, worries regard specifically the risks of increased polarization, increased radicalization, and echo chambers in society. Marginalization refers to the potential cementation of biases and prejudice through AI and algorithmic systems. You might have heard of the term algorithmic bias, which refers to how we embed human biases and stereotypes into technology. Algorithmic bias tends to hurt those on the bottom of society, those already marginalized, the worst. Finally, theory also discusses the risks of failing to protect and provide privacy as AI systems evolve. Here, the worry concerns tracking and surveillance, but also straightforward legal risks, where worries are that companies are not keeping up with the changes in regulations. And as AI systems evolve and change, we simply don't know what rules to follow. After conducting a series of interviews and surveys internally at Schibsted, discussing with both our AI practitioners, but also our top management groups, we've identified an increased concern around these areas in the future. We're more worried about them in the future than we are today. This leaves us with a unique opportunity to act now, with preventive measures. We are now getting to work with identifying coping and/or mitigation strategies to deal with these concerns as we move forward with our AI explorations. I fully respect that not every company will be able to hire a philosopher or establish full departments working with the dilemmas of AI. What we can do, though, is to follow these 3 simple points as we explore AI for our specific organizations. First of all, we need to foster diverse teams. Enrich your team with more perspectives. With different types of eyes on the challenge, you'll be better equipped to identify both the opportunities and the risks that come with these new technologies. Secondly, we need to discuss our systems and our data sets. Discuss what goals your systems are optimized for and what data you choose to train your systems on to get there. Think about whether there are structures of the past built into the systems you're employing, and discuss whether you actually want them to be there and you want your system to enhance them. Finally, iterate. Rethinking and developing is integral to AI. Embracing iteration then is a key step in improvement. If you identify downsides, if you fail, learn from it and try to do better last time. A key aspect to consider when discussing these new tools is, of course, that data and algorithmic systems like AI, they don't just appear out of thin air or exist in a vacuum, but they're built, deployed by human beings in societal, political, cultural contexts. Human beings set the standards. Human beings make the decisions on when and how to use AI. AI technologies will not help us with every task. From our experiences at Schibsted, a key, not least when it comes to news media, is to set reasonable expectations as to what AI can actually do for us. We need to start thinking about how human and machine expertise can be paired to reach success. How might we create these hybrid beings that together succeed? We need to stop portraying AI as flawless, human-like robots that would excel at any task given to them. Instead, I think we need to embrace a narrative where human beings are assisted by computational systems like AI. We can use a kitchen metaphor. If you're expecting an AI to bring you a perfectly cooked omelette, you're bound to be disappointed. But if you're expecting an AI system to help you out in the kitchen, maybe grind some cheese, chop some onions, crack the eggs, well, then you're much more likely to end up with an enjoyable lunch. You might have had to pick a few eggshells out of the mix or do a second round of onion chopping, but the overall process of getting to your omelette became smoother with the help of AI. AI is not magic, it's logic. And as an industry, I think we have to make sure that all levels of our organization understands this. So, that was all that I had planned to share. Now I'm really excited to hear if there's any questions coming in from the Slido channel.
There are.
Or from you.
Yes, there are. There are plenty of questions. And I have questions too, of course. I can't help to sort of start our discussion where on the foundation of what Women in Tech does. Because in one of your slides, you emphasize the fact that you need diverse teams to prevent bias and to sort of, support the development of responsible AI and diverse AI. So how should we do that? I mean, I've been part of Women in Tech for 5-6 years. We keep talking about the same issues. The crisis has even made it more difficult for women to get to leading positions in boards because people tend to go back to what they're used to. And it just feels like, building diverse teams is so hard. What are your experiences of actually doing that? And have you succeeded within Schibsted?
It is hard indeed, but I'm very happy to see that the developments are really that more women are getting into this field. And at Schibsted, I'd say that pretty much all the latest joiners to our AI or ML department are women, which is great to me. So our top engineer leading our AI team is female, and we're setting up a quite diverse group. But I think it's really important to not just talk about gender diversity, but talk about diversity of thought.
Yep.
And I think if we get that in place, if we, as a starting point, make sure that we're not just recruiting people from the same school with the same kind of way of thinking, belief systems, but actually get people who challenge each other, I think we're better set up to also work for gender diversity.
Yeah, and not just diversity of thought, but diversity of sort of background and what you actually do. I have a background from MIT Media Lab where people came from sort of pottery, robot programming, mathematics. It was like this broad mix of people from different areas, what society looks like, and that's what AI looks like.
Right, and for us, we have people involved in our AI explorations coming from a legal point of view, philosophy, astrophysics, bioethics, of course, machine learning and data science as well. But we're trying to create this mixed universe. Yeah.
Is there a way of talking about ML and AI and sort of portray the field that attracts women or a more diverse group, I'd say, and not just the sort of traditionally nerdy engineers, but to actually attract diverse teams?
I think one starting point for that would be to not talk about AI as this foreign robotic power, but as simple computational systems, as math, as data. Yeah. Stop doing these like almost mythological descriptions and talk about what they actually are. They're tools for anyone to use. And I hope that is a step towards making anyone able to use those tools, not the people who are just part of that group forming the myth.
Great. We have so many questions here. One question is, should AI literacy be a business priority for modern organizations?
I think it should. I think any business using AI or operating in an industry where AI is part or there won't be many industries where AI isn't part.
Exactly. I was going to say that. It's going to be part of everything.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think any organization who's in this world needs to ensure that not just the experts, but anyone who's affected, which will be anyone, everyone, has at least a basic understanding. I'm not saying that we should all be AI literate in the sense that we can all build and create AI systems, but we should have a basic understanding of what the tools are, what they can do for us, and how they might affect us. If we set the scene that way, I think we also enable this diversity of thought that we're talking about. We are inviting more people to the table. Not people who will necessarily build the systems, but at least discuss the systems and plan around the systems.
One of my favorites, let's see which camera, that's the camera I'm speaking into, hi. There's this course called Elements of AI, which was founded by the University of Helsinki together with a design agency in Finland, I guess. And it's there's a Swedish version as well. I highly recommend it. It's free and you also get högskolepoäng. So you actually get university credits for it. So check it out.
It is an excellent course. We've actually asked all employees at Schibsted to take the course because we think it sets the scene. It won't make you an AI expert, but it will at least give you a basic idea of what the technologies do.
Yeah, it makes it a little less mythical.
Right,
so
yeah.
Do you have any other recommendations for if you actually want to pursue AI, well, learn a little bit more?
One thing that I would like to market is the Journalism AI collaboration at London School of Economics, where we discuss topics related to what I've been presenting here today. So if you're interested in learning more about how AI can be used in journalism, check out the Journalism AI Collab. It's a global industry platform that Schibsted is part of, where together with the Washington Post and Nikkei, Japan's biggest business press, and Reuters, all these global news brands, we're joining forces to explore how these technologies might be used in good ways for newsrooms. So that's a great resource where they're sharing case studies and training courses on how journalists can use ML. So that's one advice.
Yeah, and there's also AI Sweden or AI Sweden, if you're interested in AI matters in general and want to get involved. Okay. Yeah, this is a great question. What's your background and path to actually working with applied AI? Where do you find the best news and trends in the field to stay on top of what's happening? So 2 questions.
2 questions. So my background is hard to pitch, but I have a background in the intersection of tech and business, you could say. So I have a master's degree from KTH and Stockholm School of Economics, and I currently do my PhD degree at KTH as well, where I'm part of the Department of Industrial Management. So I ended up working with AI systems because I'm interested in how it changes not just our technological ideas and concepts, but our ways of doing business and interacting with each other in society. So I started working with these topics from a product perspective, being the bridge between the business and the tech department, and then moved into a more strategic role where I'm now working with lots of different things.
Yep. Are you sort of assisting the whole organization when it comes to AI? So you're actually sort of an internal consultant as well when it comes to these matters? Or what does your day look like?
Yeah, you could frame it like that. So I'm part of the Central Data and Tech organization, and we're a unit supporting all of Schibsted, all the different business areas and brands with data and tech solutions. I'm actually part of the legal department that we've expanded to include not just what's regulated today, but all of these topics, including AI, that are changing our society and our ways of doing business in ways where there's not much regulation, but clear ways of doing right or wrong. So we've expanded that department to include fuzzy people like me. There was a second question to the first question that I forgot.
So where do you find the best news and trends?
Yes. So I am a big fan of newsletters in general. I think I subscribe to like 300 newsletters. There's tons of them out there. So TechCrunch, Morning Brew,
MIT Tech Review,
Tech Review, Karen Howe.
Yes, she's amazing.
There's a lot of great writers on these topics. So go look at newsletters, but also try to become part of the community around these topics. Women in Tech is a great place. You've obviously made it here, but there's other forums as well where you can interact person to person and talk about these topics. Also try to form a group in your company. I'm very happy to be here physically today, but digitally we also have really strong internal knowledge sharing platforms where we send new industry developments or just comment on stuff that we're building internally, so that we have this not just external like market analysis, but also people to people talk about what's exciting and challenging.
So a more specific question regarding the example with contextual ads. Wow, I love the shift from demographics to contextual for ads. What has the reaction been from the actual readers? Do they even notice a difference?
So our contextual ad solution is currently just in a pilot, so there's not a lot of contextual ads just yet, meaning that we don't have a lot of data on how it's performing. But my guess is that the person asking this question won't be the only person excited about this. So I'm hoping for some good proof of concept data, but it's really early. I just wanted to share the example because I think it's developments like this that the consumer doesn't necessarily know about, that I think it's good that we talk openly about.
Yeah.
But let us know if you feel like you're being contextually advertised too. Send us a review. Send us a message.
Yeah. So another question related to, well, in addition to the examples that you brought up here today, Johan has a question, very interesting. Where do you see the biggest potential for AI and ML in general in the media space? Is it within ad tech, or is it context creation, or something altogether different?
I think there's potential pretty much everywhere for AI. And I think the key is to understand the problem that you're trying to solve and how AI might fit into that problem. So the potential and the problems are going to be different for every organization. Personally, I'm very excited about the potential to use AI to democratize news and information and to make content more accessible. So we talked a bit about language AI and the Electro model, and I see huge potential in using AI to kind of break down big news stories and make it accessible, maybe translate it into new languages, making our full nation aware of what's going on. You could see during the COVID crisis that could have been a really helpful solution. But of course, yes, there's a lot of potential in advertising as well, in lots of distribution-related tasks, definitely.
Just the other day, I listened to a super interesting podcast that sort of covered the field of deep fakes, of course, because they're becoming so advanced now. But on the other hand, the sort of deep fake detection AI methods are also improving, of course. So it's this continuous sort of development of developing and detecting. And how big of an issue is this from your perspective, what do you say? And is it something that you at Schibsted are sort of concerned about and actually doing something about?
So at Schibsted, our content is generated from an editorial process. So fake news and deep fakes and that kind of manipulated content isn't necessarily as big of an issue for us as it is for user-generated content platforms like social networks.
Yep.
But of course, there's ways that deep fakes can make their way into the legacy media operation as well. And I'd say that it's definitely an important area for us to focus on. I know that we're involved in some different projects, but it's not something that I personally work with.
No.
But I think it's a great example of how pretty much with every upside of AI, not just in a new setting, but in general, with every new potential, every exciting opportunity, there is a downside. There is a risk that we need to find a way of managing, mitigating. With deepfakes, that's obviously one area, but it's like with automation and really exciting ways of streamlining our processes, there's risk of job loss. With algorithmic systems comes a risk of algorithmic bias. And I think as a society, we really have a challenge ahead of us in terms of deciding whose responsibility it is to manage those downsides. The responsibility of the creator, if you would. We need to find a way of assigning accountability there.
I'm thinking that it might actually sort of on a larger scale and sort of make the distrust in information and media even larger or sort of much more of a concern in general, just because you don't know what's real or not. But yeah, it's
right. Or
really
it's
good point.
possibly also an opportunity for traditional media, human journalists, to step up and deserve the trust that we have been giving them for a long time.
Yes. That's a great point to end with, actually. I mean, I would love to keep talking about this. We're both really nerdy when it comes to these questions. But it's 1:15. And I just want to say thank you for those of you who've been listening today. And thank you, Agnes. If I'm in this field, but I learned so much listening to your presentation, especially the applied examples within media and what you do. So huge thanks. And keep an eye out for more Women in Tech meetups. We have several coming, especially in November, and a few in December as well. So just make sure to follow Women in Tech and Schibsted in our social channels. We're everywhere, and you'll find the information that you need. So thank you. And
Thanks a lot.